A balanced lifestyle. So this is this work-life balance. It's not all about work, and it's very easy for us to get drawn into that. Right, when we're thinking more globally as agencies and providers of needs, what we're aiming to do is promote normal recovery. We know that most people are going to come through this fine, and we need to do everything we can to make that happen. Practical interventions are incredibly helpful. You know, people whose loo isn't working, or they can't empty the chemical toilet, or they're really worried about finances or insurance. We need to help them deal with that. And what we need to do with that, I think, is very clear communication. I think what really doesn't help is people being fobbed off. I think if we don't know, we say we don't know. And it's being very clear about that. Because I've heard from people that it's, you know, the multiple phone calls to different providers and one doesn't know what the other one said. When everyone's feeling pretty stressed and frustrated in the first place, that just winds this whole situation up. So I think as clear communication as we can possibly have will help. Providing access to us that is flexible and easily accessible, so not having to go through multiple layers to get the answer, that helps. And using a kind of stepped approach to problems. So I was going to give you a model in a moment about what's available in the community, which uses a stepped care approach as a way of showing you what I mean by that. So this again has been developed from disaster research, and it's been developed by the World Health Organization, initially for disasters in the third world, but a lot of it can be adapted for our situation here. So it's a triangle of most, emphasising that most people are in the lower levels, the largest numbers are here, and fewer numbers up the top. And the people at the top have the highest demands or the most complicated needs. So on the bottom layer is kind of community resilience. So this is what we provide to the vast majority of the population. So this is community support, clear education, media campaigns, telling people about what they're going through, that it is normal, and where, if they need help, how they can access it. The next level up is people who are having stressful reactions, so that aren't really settling. So this would be the people who've got persistent anxiety or are really struggling with relationships or substances. And they're getting help through the NGO sector, which is being provided very appropriately, again to quite large numbers of people. The next level up is people whose functioning is being impaired, so they're really not coping in the workplace or the home environment. And that input is mainly being provided by primary care, by GPs and by counsellors attached to those services. And then there's people with more complex needs. And I'm going to mention in a moment the mental health problems that people can develop. And that's being addressed primarily by specialist mental health. But that's a very small minority of people. And that's just showing a sort of stepped care approach that we're trying to give the most people the most effective intervention at the right stage. Thinking about when do people need further help? Often it's around practical stuff, accommodation, work, finances, really, really important. You know, we could do all the therapy or counselling in the world, but still if your chemical loo can't be emptied, it's really not, you know, we really need to do that. People who have persistent low mood, who are persistently ruminating, like constantly going over the event or what could have happened or what might happen. People who are feeling overwhelmed or desperate, who are getting very irritable, angry or very anxious and avoiding things, or people who are getting significant problems with alcohol or drug abuse. They need more help. I just thought I'd mention that the mental health problems that you can see after a disaster. So most people will be absolutely fine and won't get any ongoing problems. But those who do get problems, they are in this realm. So it is things like anxiety, low mood, post-traumatic stress you might have heard about, complicated grief for some people, substance abuse problems and relationship problems. Who are the people who are at risk of getting those problems? People with previous mental health difficulties, people who've had high exposure, so that means some really bad things have happened to them in the earthquake. They may have experienced loss of a person, a family member, a friend. They may have been severely financially affected or their house severely damaged. People with few social supports who are really quite isolated in the community. High-risk professions, rescue workers, ambulance men, firemen, mental health workers as well, because they're constantly going over things with their clients. And then there's going to be a new group of people, people who've had no previous difficulties before, potentially any of us. So people with probably who have lost previous roles in their life, you know, who may have been previously very financially secure, now may have lost their job, lost their house, a whole new group of people. Potentially men who aren't very good at talking about things, who may present later down the track. What alerts us, and I've covered most of this, of course if someone is suicidal they would need urgent intervention. I've covered the rest of the features that I've talked about earlier. Basically the people who need help are those who are just not improving or are getting worse. So there's no one thing you look out for, it's more that people are they're just not gradually getting better, and it is going to take months, but that's probably the biggest signal really that people need more help. Or their emotional reactions are extremely severe. In an emergency, so someone who is at high risk or suicidal should use whatever are your usual processes for dealing with people like that, and most organisations will have a clear pathway to access help. Here in Christchurch it often would be through the psychiatric emergency service, but most organisations will have protocols for dealing with that. For people with less sort of acute needs, it would be recommending they go and see their GP if they're really not functioning. So, what are the key messages about plans for the next few months? I think it really is about working together. So services and sectors that previously may not have worked together as well really need to come together, and I think there is a genuine desire for that to happen, and I think it is happening, which is great. Next key message is looking after ourselves. It is really, really important, and I think we are getting pretty tired now. We've kept going for quite a few months and it's sort of coming home to roost a bit now. So we really, really need to take care of ourselves, and it is doing the simple things and making sure that you do have breaks, you do have weekends, you don't do excessive hours at night, and looking after your colleagues and pointing that out to them. Clear communication and pathways. So this is both with the public and amongst ourselves, being very clear what we need to be saying and what we want to happen. And there's very clear pathways across sectors and across services. And trying to support all the areas, because we really are all in this together, and that's the way we're going to get through this together. Okay, what it's good to know is truly, resilience is the most common observation after disasters. And it might not feel like that at times, but at other times you think, actually, I must be remarkably resilient to still be standing, really, because we've all gone through a lot. But that is the default position for us as humans, that resilience is what will happen. We also learn that we can handle crises effectively. Not necessarily perfectly at the time, but generally we're managing them pretty effectively. And it truly does bring a community closer and really does make you look at the priorities in your life in a different way, which actually is good. So, you know, my usual response to just go shopping, and the fact that I don't want to go shopping at the moment, that's probably better in the long term. It's much better, my husband would say, right now. But, you know, it does make you reorientate what's important, really. And there's just a picture from the memorial service, which really is emphasising that we as a community, we're actually a great community, and we can come through this. But it's doing it together that will get us through.